Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of the Low Code Café, episode 29. This week we'll continue doing our technical series and looking more into the workflows. And if you're not here last week, we had the wonderful opportunity to have Angela and Patrick present a use case from a customer, very hot use case, the Employee Assistance Program. I touched on that in the past, and it was requested that we have an in-depth demo. So that video is now updated to YouTube channel, and you can go see it as with all webinars that are recorded. And for those of you that are new to this webinar, this is an event that we are doing every week, every Wednesday at the same time, the same hour. And it's an event where we get together with our team and with our community to discuss what's coming up in the product, but also see the product in action, see the hands-on part. We also sometimes have guest speaker from our customers, like, for example, last week, we also had the customer for which the EAP system has been built. We had that customer in the call giving us his opinion, first-hand opinion. So it was a wonderful occasion. So again, if you have stories to share about low code, about Plant an App, how you've changed life, how you build awesome technologies, we'd be glad to have you present it in this webinar. So reach out to me. As mentioned, all these webinars are recorded and we publish them on our YouTube channel, and we'll post the link in the chat window in a few minutes. And there you can see all the past editions. And as you navigate through the videos, you'll notice they are 1 hour long, of course, but we've added chapters to each video, right? So you can easily find different parts of the video that interest you, like the product updates or the low code part or the from the trenches part. Cool. So without spending too much time taking from my colleagues, I would like to hand it off to Reza Garrow, our head of product, to give us a bit of overview on what's coming in the product, but also show us some of these features. So Reza, if you are around, I will stop my sharing and leave you to continue this presentation.
Thanks, Bogdan. Hi, everyone. So we've got a lot going on these days. We are currently working on the 1.11 or 1.12 release. 1.11 has shipped. It's out there and available. There's a few hot fixes that have come into it. One of them is security related for Action Form and Action Grid. You can access it from within your update screen and just apply those in. There's also a hotfix for licensing. This won't impact most people. However, I need to call out that if you're running your site with the capability to be accessed in a mixed mode, meaning www.yoursite.com and then just yoursite.com, it was tripping up the licensing a little bit. And so that's fixed in 1.11.58. 57 is the stable. That's what's out there. I recommend going to it. If and only if you have that situation where you're running in that kind of mixed mode of being able to, for the URL, then you can apply that, but you will need to, you must then also apply the Action Form, Action Grid updates as well. So those, if you go to .58, you'll need both Action Form and Action Grid in order for everything to work well. There's some shared code amongst those versions. Otherwise, keep yourself at 57 and just take in the Action Form and Action Grid security patches. If you like, all of that will be defaulted and available in release 1.12. So in 1.12, heavy focus on workflows, being able to save and test within Workflow Builder, being able to define required inputs as required, being able to organize your workflows and group them, and of course the exporting and importing of workflows out of the application and into other apps or environments that you have. So that should be a huge time saver and make these a lot better to work with. And today is our theme then is workflows and taking a look at how to use them and make the best of them and things like that. So, on the heels of hopefully whetting your appetite for workflows, we'll have even more good stuff coming for workflows. On the entity builder side, very sought after feature, we'll call it, or enhancement, but being able to give read access to an entity to the all users pseudo role that DNN has. So this will then allow your read actions and things like that to work for non-authenticated users. So, you know, if everyone's logged in and it's like an internal system, things are great. But when you're trying to expose some of this stuff out to non-signed in users, you're having to do workarounds and inject users into context and things. No more of that. Writing SQL and things as a workaround. It should all just work natively then. Going to be able to turn off from the entity builder, toggle on and off, putting in the KPI tiles on top of a page. That'll be optional off by default, but any pages that you say, hey, I'd love to have some tiles here, you'll be able to just flip that on and it'll put it into place for you. This one's kind of a late entry that came in, but it was a very needed thing. It's working around a limitation of DNN. And so, you know, we have the roles in App Builder and Plantain App, you know, the citizen developer, the managers, the admin, this sort of things, these native roles, but none of them can create pages short of outside of the entity builder. And so you'd have to use the DNN persona bar and all this kind of stuff, or grant this user higher privileges even to be able to do that. So there's going to be a new page management section, and it will have all of the pages that are in your site available there, the ability to move them around, similar to the persona bar, a lot simpler and cleaner, and no need to then do all of that through the persona bar. And so any pages you create in the entity builder will show up in here. Any pages that are system pages will show up. And so the idea is, sometimes you just need a page. You want to roll your own, you want to put your own stuff on it, just some basic content, things that are maybe external facing to non-signed in users, stuff like that. And you don't need a whole entity and forms and grids to go along with that. Maybe you just want a place to keep some of your entities nested under that you're using to maintain lookup lists and things, and you just need a placeholder page in the menu, for example. So you can pick it as the parent. You'll be able to add and create those from within App Builder under this page management section. And a lot of work going on to make the developer experience better. A couple of them, if you're using multiple instances of API endpoints, so App Builder comes with built-in APIs that are generated. But if you are wanting to or have already your own APIs implemented using our API feature, you can't get to those from App Builder right now. You have to navigate somewhere and have a page and look for them. So you'll have the ability to toggle and pick between them when there is more than just the system one in effect. And then we're doing a lot of work on unifying our logging. Currently, when I say logging, I don't mean the DNN administrator logs, I mean the logs that go on disk. So when you turn a form or a grid into, or even use the debug action, these logs are kind of all over the place and they're on disk. So you're either going to need to remote to the server that the site's running on or have FTP access and then navigate kind of a confusing file structure. So we're unifying all of our modules and features to start logging into a common location and then having that exposed inside of App Builder under the logs section. And so you'll have kind of two tabs. One is for the DNN, the administrator logs that are currently there, but then you'll be able to see all the different disk logs that are happening and download them. Initially here, we're just going to allow them to be downloaded. So as the log files get bigger, there's some limits that get set and cut them off at certain size, but those are still can get very big, and it's very hard just to show megabytes and megabytes of data in the screen at one time. So we're going to figure out how to do that and make that a clean and fast experience. But in the meantime, it's just super handy to be able to get at these logs and look at them when you've turned on enhanced logging, or a lot of times these logs will complement maybe just a generic error you're seeing in the administrator logs. And so as you're working with us sometimes for support or posting things in community portal, these logs will be gold to help you troubleshoot or to help us better support you. And as I mentioned, that hotfix came for the security patch of a third-party library that we used. And so we've just upgraded that to the latest. Everything's good there. And that will be default in 1.12. Just quickly looking out ahead, I want to start kind of getting out ahead of the next release and give a preview of where we're going in this quarter. So, I mentioned the work we're doing with workflows and being able to group things and stuff like that. So next kind of step for us then is the entity builder and being able to start separating your application data that you're defining in entities from the system schema and data that is driving your site. So by separating this, by letting you better group and organize your entities, specifying at the time of creation or where you manage your entities, what fields kind of should be exposed on a form, which ones are hidden, shown on your grid views and things like that, and not. So just making a better user experience there. But through this separation, we're moving towards the kind of big first milestone, major milestone that we're after this year, and that's to be able to export and import applications, whether between environments, development, test, production, or just having a great little template app that we want to share or you want to resell or something like that. That'll start opening up our marketplace. And so people can start sharing and selling their creations as well. Keep going with the page builder. So that's the new default theme that ships with the product if we're hosting it, but it is available to everyone to install, and it just has that better layout. We looked at this a couple of episodes back. Right now, beyond giving you the power to really build and work from the page level, you have abilities to customize kind of your colors and things. And so we just want to keep extending that and giving you the ability to start really making the look and feel of the application your own, and changing things like your fonts and what's exposed to the users or not. Things like, do you want search exposed? Do you want people managing their profiles? That sort of thing. And you'll be able to turn that stuff on or off pretty easily. And just even your own custom CSS. We have the calendar module, which is out now, and you can be trying that. It's kind of a proof of concept. We're taking feedback on that right now and doing some enhancements to it in 1.12, just kind of getting it really good and solid. But there's also another template that is teased in there, and that's the new listings. And it's just basically, your tabular view that you're seeing now, but a very modern and clean version of it. It's much faster and just looks newer and fresh. And so we'll be exposing that and getting that out there as well in the next release or two. And giving you more access to your logs and things like that I mentioned. So always working on stability and the minor enhancements, the feedback from the portal, different support tickets and things that are opened as well. And that's always being worked in along the way. So a lot of good stuff coming. And like I said, the big kind of major milestone that we're after is being able to export, import, kind of backup, restore your applications. So stay tuned, that's all coming.
Great, that's good. That's a good start. Good information. Let me jump in here with some from the trenches segment. I'm sorry. Do you see my screen sharing from the trenches?
Yes, I can see it.
Thank you so much. Okay, lots of good stuff in there, Reza. Reza's going to be back to us in a minute, and I'm just going to call your attention to a question. Maybe when you jump back on, there's a question from Hans that you'll be able to provide some input for. So a couple of things that I found of interest this week. First of all, I had the opportunity to talk to one particular customer, and they had two different kinds of users of the system: a citizen developer and a low-code engineer. And the quote that I got from the citizen developer, and this is like a business power user, there's an application that they call EBP, Event Billing Program, but they just wouldn't have built it without a low-code tools. The cost to build, to pay someone else to do it was just too high, and so there's just evidence there that that the tools make a difference in business lives. And then from a low-code engineer, this is an experienced developer in VB.NET or .NET languages, and just the learning curve that he had. He's building a complex integration system, and he's productive with 2 days invested. So there's really great stories there around people adopting the low-code Plankton app. This last week, I put out another low-code feature focus. If you're not subscribed to our channel, you should be. This is a nice, concise, hey, here's how to do a manual layout of a form. We had a client that is interested in providing some special, using the field sets to provide some field set HTML tag to provide some readability for people with disabilities. And this is just a simple solution that's already built into the product where you can add your extra HTML directly into a manual layout. So take a look at that one, 5 minutes. And then today, as Reza said, we're focusing on workflows. And so I'm going to be talking about just kind of an introduction to workflows for anybody who hasn't seen it. And it's, I won't go too deep into how to build a workflow. I think you'll see a lot of that when Reza comes back. But I also wanted to talk about testing workflows because workflows have defined inputs and defined outputs. It makes it very easy to interactively test the workflow. You can run it, provide some inputs, and get an output and say, yep, that's right. But it's also possible to create a workflow to test a workflow. And so that goes towards an ongoing commitment to quality assurance, making sure that your any changes that you make to a workflow automatically report if it's not giving the answer that's expected. And finally, we'll talk about creating a workflow to run all your workflow tests. So with one workflow, you can test all your other workflows, make sure that everything's working as expected. So I think that'll be an interesting look, and so we'll just dive into that now. So I'm going to be spending all of my time in workflows today, and I've built, let me move this out of the way, I've built a thing called MathDemo. Now this is a very uncomplicated workflow that will just run interactively. You'll see what it does. If I say that I want to take, it asks for a number, an operand, so I'm going to say add, and another number and run it, and it adds and gives a result of 9. So it has 3 input parameters, two numbers and an operand, and then a result, 9. And if we change the operand to subtract, we'll get an answer of 1. So very simple workflow that does something, and you provide it some input parameters, and you get a defined result. So from a what did we do standpoint, I'll show you that, like I say, it's not very complex. Oops, I'm going to try and edit this MathDemo. Brings up the workflow, and I wanted to just kind of point out the workspace for anybody who hasn't seen it. There is a help button up here in the corner, and this links to 3 different YouTube videos that'll give you an introduction to how to set it up, the workflow parameters, how to run them. So definitely worth your 10-15 minutes to just sit and watch those videos. But in the main areas, we have inputs, process, and outputs. So on the inputs, as you saw in my interactive running session, we're collecting number 1, which is a decimal, the operand, which is a text, a number 2, which is another decimal number. And on the output side, we're putting out a result. So that's the result of the computation. So the process isn't very, very difficult. We are checking the operand, and when it's add, so operand equal add, we do we compute the result as the result of a do math, where we're saying number 1 plus number 2 and goes to the result, and then the result gets output. In the same way, the subtract one doing about the same thing, except it's got a minus sign. Again, very simple. It's just to illustrate the use of a workflow. So if but I am going to use the export mechanism. This is a new feature that Reza's gotten into the product and the development team. But I'm just going to copy this block and import it again. We're going to add a divide option because I didn't add that already. So we have a copy of that item now, and so we're going to call this divide, and the result is going to be number 1 divided by number 2. So just a quick modification. We also need to add a branch to it, so I'm going to branch to that. And when you do a branching, you also have to branch back to a merge block, so where everything comes back together. So we have that, and then I'm going to copy this condition and apply it to this one and just change it to divide. So now we have, now the thing knows how to do division, and so we'll save it and test it and make sure that it does what it's supposed to do. So interactively, we can run this and say 81 divide by 9, and we get the result of 9. So it does exactly what we hoped it would do. But now on to, how can we test? How can we make sure that the workflows that we've developed are in good shape? So I've developed another workflow called MathDemo QA test. And when I run it, it doesn't take any parameters, but it returns a number of tests that are failed. So a failed count of 0. So it's all working just as it's supposed to, but let's see what's inside this one. So if we edit the QA test and look at this, there's a number of pairs. We're doing an addition test and we're checking it, a subtraction test and checking it. We're testing multiply a couple of times. So let's see what that looks like. If we go into addition test 1, we're just running that that workflow, passing in 501 and add and 525. So if this workflow is running correctly, we would expect the answer of 526 as the result. So in our check the addition step, we do a condition. If the result is not 526, then I am adding to the fail count and adding a statement to the fail detail. It'll tell me exactly what test has failed. And so I'm going to again use copy and paste, the export and import to, so I'm going to export this multiplication test and we'll just add a test for division. So I'm going to copy those and import them right back in. So we're going to have we're going to execute the math demo, and so let's build these out. So in this test, I'm going to do the check divide test 1, and this is the divide test 1, and what it's going to do is to we're going to say 81 divide by 9, and it's going to come out to a result. So that's the divide test 1, and the check step is going to be check divide test 1, and if the result is not equal to 9, then it's a failure. And so we'll add to the fail count, and we will report back the name of the test that failed, divide test 1, and save. And now we'll just wire this into our diagram here. So we will connect this over here and connect this to here and this to the end. So now we've added a new divide test and we save it. And so if everything's working correctly, when we run this again, the test series of tests, it ran through all those tests and it had no failures. So that demonstrates that we can QA test and set up a QA test that we can repeat. But let's just see. Let's change. If somebody were to bungle an edit of the math demo, and I'm going to do that intentionally right now. And if, for example, we were to accidentally change the condition here from multiply to some bad value, so there's no way for it to get to the multiply branch. When we run our QA test, what we're going to see is that there are 2 failures, and it's the QA test multiply test 1, multiply test 2. Both of the multiplication tests failed, and so we would know to go back and look at that. So then the final thing that I mentioned when we started is to create a workflow to run all workflow tests. I have this third workflow, and what it does is it calls the execute MathDemo QA test and accumulates failures. If we developed more tests, we could just wire them in the same way, just wire in those additional workflows. And so we can run this one test, and it will go out and find run all of our QA tests and come up with a total number of failures. So that's a quick way that you can build tests to verify that your workflows that take inputs and outputs are working correctly. You just test for the result that you know is a known good result, and then you can test them all. And then if we were to extend this just one step farther, we could build an automation that would run the QA test, for example, once a day, and generate an email report, an error report. So you could have an ongoing testing to make sure that that your workflows were working correctly. This can be expanded in any number of ways, but that's the overview of testing workflows, and just an idea that you might put into practice if the answers have to be right. And with that, I am going to stop sharing and pass it to Reza, and he's going to continue on talking about workflows.
All right. Hey there. Sorry about that. I have a bear of
Sorry,
time.
I ended abruptly and with no warning, but jump right in.
I can never find the Zoom screen.
I got it. All right, jump in.
All right, so with that said, yeah, so I want to kind of get my hands dirty with you all today and take a look at just kind of a real world situation of kind of where and when you would use these workflows. And so I've got let me make sure you guys are seeing the right screen here. Apologies there. Too many screens open. Okay, so one more try here.
While you're working on that, I'll just mention that I am posting our standard links onto the webinar, so you can take, if you want to sign up for the low code feature focus or our other YouTube kinds of things, please jump in, use those links.
I'm sharing the wrong screen. Let me try my share again. I apologize. Not sure why it's not showing it to me in the share. Let me just close some things. Apologies.
You know, we make this live TV show work look like it's easy every week, and it is a challenge sometimes.
All right. Are you seeing a screen right now that's got a calculator on it?
Fire build.
There we go. Okay. So what I wanted to do is kind of take it into real world and maybe build like a little application here. And so there's a calculator I found online that's kind of handy, and it lets you assess, like, should you buy or lease software or build your own, right? And I guess it doesn't necessarily have to maintain the software, but in this case, I think it does. And so you put in a cost of getting an external service. Get my screen a little bit better sized for everyone. There we go. And what it's going to do is also ask you about, okay, so it's $5,000 a year in this case, let's say, for buying some software and a license for it. But then if you're going to build your own tool, how many employees are you going to need for that? How much time in months is it going to take them to build it? What do they make a month? What's your overhead? It could be things like, the cost that's factored in for benefits or office space, licenses that they would need, anything like that goes on top of each person. It comes up with, well, here's what an employee costs you a month. And then how many days a month is it going to take to over the course of a year to maintain this thing? And then it will calculate for you what it costs to build it, how much it costs to maintain it annually, and then ideally, what are you saving annually by building it yourself versus buying it over and over and over again. And it'll come and give you your break-even point. How long is it going to take before you're profitable? And they've got nice breakdowns about how these formulas and things are calculated. And ultimately, the advice is that anytime if you can break even in under 3 years, then it's better to build than to buy, right? So I thought, well, this is a neat calculator. This would be a really cool thing for a business to maybe have on their website, to use for lead generation, this sort of thing. And so we're coming at it, and I said, okay, I want to build this with Plantainapp, but I don't just want to build it. I want to ultimately take this to the next level, right? So whereas here, I just put in the numbers and I get some calculation and that's it. I want to use these calculations and I want to end up pulling this in, get some information from the user, because I feel like this is valuable, right? And I can capture the information. I can make a nice, pretty PDF out of this, and I can email it off to them. And then use this as a source of follow-up, maybe do different calculations. Hey, if you bought software A or software B or software C versus building your own, right? And then someone could do this on behalf of the customer, or the customer could come do it themselves. So that was the premise I went into this with, and kind of got us set up here a little bit. And so first thing I did, let's take a look a little bit at the back end of it and how we would go about this, the Plantainapp way. And so I needed some entities to begin with, right? And I said, okay, well, I'm going to call these assessments, these calculations, right? And so I made an assessment entity. Before I take a look at that one, I made a couple of other ones that kind of will be used as references in here, right? As this thing flows and moves, maybe I'm building it for my customer and I want to send it off to them, but I'm not ready to send it off to them right now. So I probably want some statuses, right? Maybe if there was an error or a problem, once it's been emailed and sent out, like there's a process we've described here, hint, a flow that needs to happen. And I want to update the status as I move through the flow. So I want to keep track of where things are at. So it's not just an all or nothing, big bang, happens one time only, okay? And then, while I have the DNN, it's for a person that I'm sending this to, right? So I have the user entity available to me in Plantainapp, but maybe not everyone's going to have a user account, or I don't need them to register with the site. And so a lot of times I like to create a person entity where I can extend off a little bit further and get other information and things, and not rely just on a user ID. So I could associate a user with a person, and I could also just get their information, name, email address, phone number, what industry they're in, what size of lead they might be for me, any of that other kind of stuff I want to know about them that really isn't tied to a user account. And so if we look at this assessment entity, and all I kind of really did was I just went through here and I started looking at, well, what are my inputs here? What are these different formulas? And just experimented, iterated my way towards coming up with the fields I would need. So you don't have to know it all up front at once, but I said, okay, I probably want a name for the assessment. I might want to need some way to know who is this for. Maybe I want to put that in the PDF up there, right? A build versus buy for Dale or for XYZ Computing Inc. You know, whatever I want to do, I'll have some flexibility and I'll probably go ahead and calculate that. But that is the thing that's going to represent one of these assessments. And you'll notice that I've got it set down here as my display name then, right? And just went through the fields and, you know, what's the buy cost? And that was the first thing. If you were going to buy this, what does it cost to buy it? I'll have a recommendation. That's kind of the net result of this thing, right? So maybe someone, you know, they want to check the math. They want to know the math. Where did you come up with this? But ultimately, I want to just be able to say, should you build or buy? And that's not really something they were doing in that calculator, but that's something I think I wanted to have in mind, right? So put that in and, you know, it'll just be text for now. So I have flexibility. I can always change that up later if I wanted it to be another entity in a reference or something like that. How many employees are required to build this? So it's just the things we saw there in the calculator. Okay, and going so a lot of it are just inputs.
Makes sense.
And some of them are the ones that are going to get calculated. And so what the system generated for me, I'll just open this up here in a new tab. Out of the box is it made this assessments entity for me. It puts the listing on, whole lot of data here, right? And so I probably don't want to expose all of this once I get polished up, but it creates a form for me. And if I just wanted to hand type in all of the data, I can do that, right? And maybe put a little bit of work into this and make it calculate things. But when this, on the entities and the forms that are kind of the big bang, the whole point of this application that I'm building, I like to detach off a little bit from the entity builder. I can use it and they'll play nice enough together, but if I go wild and start putting calculations and different things in, I like to just leave the system one alone. And this is a place where maybe as the developer or as the owner of the company, I can come in and change and override things, but I want to have a version of it that is for the end user, the end customer, where based on who they are, what state they're in and stuff, I can show more or less, I can put some sliders in, I can kind of stray from the script. And so, so on the home page, I basically dropped in, got a text HTML module. I put some of my formulas and values. I can kind of walk the user through what's happening. And I just borrowed that from the calculator page we were on. And then I started kind of just laying things out. Ultimately, I don't want it to do all the calculations on the fly and things like that. I want to draw them through a process because I want them to give me their information. I want to have a reason to send them a pretty PDF and things, and I don't want to spoil the surprise just with having the data show up on a form. So this, you know, in my mind, this is not a calculator, it's an assessment. And I kind of want to show, like, so it's the default out of the box to begin with. I copied it off and I started styling a little bit. And if we start filling this out, and so I haven't, and I've got it at a point, and I just wanted it to kind of be, I can pick if it's for a person. By default, it starts out as a draft, you know, just put a name in there. Let's just say it's $5,000 a year to buy something, okay? And if I want to build something, maybe it's going to be 2 employees to build it. It's going to take them 6 months. I'm going to try to keep the math simple here. I'm going to give them $1,000 a month, and you'll notice that employee cost starts filling out. So That's one that it's not kind of I don't mind that that calculates on the fly. Overhead is maybe 25%. So it costs me $1,250 per person. Now you'll notice here that, and let's say it's 3 days of maintenance a month, okay? And so, but we don't have a cost to build an annual maintenance. I'm gonna hide these fields. These are things that I need to calculate. And these calculations, as you'll see, they're not rocket science, but some of them depend on other ones and things. And this started becoming, it got out of hand kind of quickly trying to do it inside the form, right? So on the fly in JavaScript and things like that. And so I said, okay, I don't want to bind here. I'm actually going to do some calculations. And in this case, let's go ahead and when I submit this, what should happen is it should insert and create the assessment. Then it should go and do some calculations and figure out these things, then update the record. So it needs to retrieve the record back that was just created, and then go and update that record back with the now calculated data. And then I should have all my data in. Ideally, then what I would do is show a message to the user that says, hey, your assessment and PDF's on the way, and that sort of thing. So I hit add, and uh-oh, I have an error, right? And let's take a look at behind the scenes here of why workflows, I think, is the solution here. So what I have on my add button is an increasingly growing stack. I'll zoom in a little bit here so we can see better, of actions and things. And it starts becoming very hard to troubleshoot and debug. So let's just walk through the flow of what happens here. One, I create a new assessment, and I'm using, and if you've got existing stuff, it would be a SQL statement here, right? To either call a stored procedure or to write an insert statement where you're taking, but essentially that's what's happening here. This one is generated for me by the entity builder, okay? And it's kind of what is on every form that the system generates for adding or editing. And it kind of takes all the fields that are available as form fields and passes them into what ends up running as a nice, tight, secure, performant SQL statement that'll update without me having to write SQL. So I don't mind that it's going to go ahead and put, like, I don't know annual savings at this point. I haven't calculated it, but these are kind of the raw inputs that I took from the user. And I'm saying, okay, I had a problem. And if we were to go look at the listing, we'd see that probably a record got inserted, so I didn't try to do everything in one pop. Even in my form actions, I break things up a little bit. So a record should go in. Then I'm using the inject data action, right? These are really, really handy to create tokens, think of them like variables, that I can use while I'm processing. So you can use these in workflows, you use them in forms. Some people are like, yeah, I know this. Some haven't come across or used this yet, but these are super handy and they can do some powerful things. And you'll notice I had to use several of them because while I'm creating the variable, I don't have it available to use right here within itself. So the first thing I do is I want to calculate cost to build. And using the formula, it's the number of employees required times the time to build times the employee cost. So if I need 2 people and I need them for 6 months and they cost me $1,250 a month, then that's this math right here. And then I say, okay, what's my annual cost, a year after it's built to run it, right? And so that's how many days of maintenance. We said that an employee. So if you got 2 people, it's really just a man or human month type thing, right? And so it doesn't assume that there's 3, 4, 5 people. Just think if one person was going to do this, even if you're splitting the work later, it's one person times their cost divided by 22 work days in a year times 12 months a year. And now I know what it costs me to maintain this thing a year after I've built it. So I get those first. Then I come and I say, okay, I want to calculate my annual savings. And that's basically where I'm getting the delta between if I bought it minus what it costs me after it's built to maintain it. So there's the build cost separate from, let's say it costs me $1,000 a year to maintain this thing, but it costs me $5,000 a year every year. If I don't build it and I bought it, it's $5,000 no matter what. sure, I took the upfront cost to build it, but now after that cost, every year after that, it's 1,000. So the example here would be 5,000 minus 1,000. It's going to be $4,000 in savings a year, right? And lastly, you want to get the break-even point, because it's not just that it saves you some money. And maybe in that example, well, 4,000 a year, that's a slam dunk. Sometimes things are going to be tighter, right? And it might take 1, 2, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years for me to make my money back. And remember, this break-even number is in years. I need this to be able to make that determination of, do I recommend build or buy? And so this is just the cost to build it divided by the annual savings. And so then I know when I would break even on this. So these are just the formulas that were in the calculator. I've got them in here. Now I've got a set of tokens that I can use, and I use the partially update assessment action. Okay, and I just map through the drop downs. I don't want to touch the world. This is a really powerful action, by the way, if you've worked in SQL and have your own queries and things like that, especially people that work with like stored procedures. They're really great to get started, and you take like every field possible and you make a stored procedure to do an update. But sometimes, a lot of times, you just need to partially update some of the information. Well, now do I have to go fetch all the values that are already there so they don't get overwritten with empty values, that sort of thing? These partially updates are super, super handy for that. And then I'm going to show a message to the user that says, hey, success, right? And a link that'll take them to it and things like that. But we had a problem. Things didn't work here for me, right? And I just have this message that says something needs to be in dollars. And so what you end up having to do a lot of times in this situation is you either start writing debug logging stuff to the admin logs, or you start writing something to the console, right? And this becomes very time consuming and painful, and a lot of refreshes and refill the form out and walk the whole flow. Imagine if you are generating PDFs, if you are sending emails and you're trying to troubleshoot, you've got to come and conditionally disable actions, things like that. And so this is where I'm saying, let's use workflows instead. But let's not recreate that whole big mess in a workflow, because you'll end up with a very similar situation. Let's take our logical kind of functions that were happening step by step and make a workflow for each one of them, okay? And so like the first one I would make, in this case, you don't have to do it all as one big bang. Why not take and do these calculations, okay? And now something seems to be wrong in my calculations. And when I do have that debug out, I see that, and we can take a look here on the screen. So in the console, I was writing out, and we can add again. I was writing out like, what are the values? And you can see that something's wrong, they're failing here, right? So I'm not even able to log this out right now. So something's wrong, maybe I have a syntax error or something like that. And so this is a great place to start, and you can replace things in chunks. And I think, let's see if we can knock this out here together today. And so I have a feeling that it's in my calculations. And so I have kind of a big screen here, so why don't we go with like kind of you can toggle or you can open up to Windows, but I'm gonna open up another one here.
You're absolutely right. This is a process that just cries out for workflows, that you can put that calculation, all the variables into one thing and get it reliably working, and then just consume it very easily.
So we've got the page builder on here. So instead of having to hop back and forth and go other places, I can just bring my form right up. And all I want to do with this one is I want to take these inject tokens, these context ones that I was doing, and see if I can get that math and troubleshoot that math. Once I do, I can replace all of those actions with one workflow, okay? And so first one that I'm doing here is calculating cost to build. And so I'm going to need some inputs into the workflow. So first one is employees required. And that's going to be an integer, a whole number. The next one is the time to build in months. So how long is it going to take them to build it? Next one is, what is my employee cost?
Should time to build, is that a decimal? Or what is that?
Yes. And my employee cost, though, is money. So the next thing that we calculate is our annual savings. And now this is not going to be an input. This will be an output parameter. So we'll add this on to the output, but we need to know our buy cost and our annual cost. Okay, and so annual cost is something we're actually going to calculate in here. So I don't need to pass that in. It gets calculated, but I will want to pass in my buy cost. That is also money. Now in this case, I think inside of a workflow like this, I don't see a lot of reason to actually worry about money formatting. And it might just be a little bit, since I'm doing a lot of heavy calculations and things, and I'm not trying to format out or do anything like that, it has to do with dollar symbols and stuff like that. I think I'm going to take these money ones and I'm going to turn them into decimals. And that way it's just cleaner to work with. If I end up doing this with JavaScript or something, actions inside the workflow, and not need all of these inject contexts, then I can do that pretty easily. So last one here then is calculating our break even. And turns out these are actually fields that I already have or will be calculating. So this ends up becoming an output for me. So a couple ways I can go with this. Now I'm going to try, just in the interest of time here, to be very quick about this. And in this case, I'm going to just export these actions and import them right into my workflow.
Nice. And this kind of export and import is going to be a great tool for people who are migrating from using.
Exactly. No need to recreate everything by hand. You can take a lot of the stuff that you have in here and just pull it in. Now, you know, and what you'll find though is that you're not bound by the limitations of just running down that stack linearly. And so you have the splits and things. And so some of the stuff, a lot of the stuff that you're probably doing, if you're doing it inside the form, there's better ways to do it inside the workflow, and you can adjust and tune. So just grab this last one. Whoops, wrong one. Maybe I got them. 1, 2, 3. Ah, 3. Okay. So we're good. We will end this here. And all we're going to do is take a look at.
Now just go clean them up.
Yes. And so in reality, this is just employees required, time to build, employee cost. And then I think if we didn't, days, whoops. Maintenance, employee cost. So we'll just make sure that employees required days. That's the harder one. Employees required. Yep. I think I missed days of maintenance. That is an integer. And this is a good time while I'm pulling these out then. So I know cost to build is something that I'm going to end up having here, and annual cost. So I'll put these as outputs. So all I want to do right now to help me troubleshoot and then ultimately swap this out once I fix it is just having a very easy, cheap, fast way to make adjustments and test. And the neat thing too, when you're doing these outputs, you can name them the same thing. See, so I'm just saying, look, I'm going to have an output parameter of the workflow called cost to build. Keep the names the same. And then I had an input, or I had something that was calculated. It's going to have a value. That's the bracket syntax on it. I shoot back here, and I want annual cost. All right. And then just because I see the time, I'm going to, for a minute, disable these. And then we should be able to just save and test this for a minute. And we'll say calculate savings. We'll say 1 employee, 1 month, $1,000. If I bought it, it's $5,000, and it's 1 day of maintenance. So already I can see that there's
but we can't see it at the bottom, but yeah.
Oh, let me pull things up a little
Maybe
bit.
I can't. Yeah.
Can we see that?
Yeah, that helps. Thanks.
Okay. And so it could be my Zoom. So I already see my first problem. Something is happening where I'm trying to render my formulas, and rather than getting the result of the calculation, I'm actually just getting the tokenized, what would have went in, what's sitting there to be run, right? And so that's why it's failing on the front end, right? I'm not even getting math processed out of this. And
but
so
this is revealing it so well.
Yes. And so now I know, okay,
yep.
Maybe I need to do a do math token if I want to keep using these like this. I can also just handle all of this in one JavaScript action. And so this is basically the moral of my story, if we're just taking it at a high level, is to break out. I would have another workflow that is for creating the assessment, and I would take that off of the form because I'm going to want this create to happen in a lot of other places. I have 2 forms, as we already saw, one for like the kind of more privileged logged in user to go and save, and maybe from that listing or grid, like I'm doing it on behalf of the customer. That's one instance of all of this that I don't want to wire all that up. And then the customer is doing it, right? So one workflow can solve that problem for me. I know that after I do my calculations, I want to update the workflow. So I would have one that is for updating the calculations. I have one here that's going to calculate. I would break one out and have one that's for just generating PDF. So I will have something that makes a pretty PDF. So normally in this example, that would have been the next step that happens, is it builds a PDF with all that data that's available right there on the fly in the form. Then the next thing it's going to do is stick that in an email and send it out. Then it's probably going to come and update the status to say that, hey, it's been sent, right? Well, I would break all those out into very small, simple workflows. And then I have one workflow that's going to tie all this together. So when I push that button, all I'm going to do is take the payload of my form fields, and I'm going to say, go make this happen. And then it's the job of my workflow engine to go ahead and orchestrate all of this. And when I want to change the way the PDF looks, I want to change my calculations, I want to adjust them or something, I'm not in a situation where I'm on this form trying to test, accidentally sending an email out, polluting up my environment with a bunch of junk PDFs and things. Each component can be tested like this individually, and the whole flow can be tested. And something we have coming and is in the works with all this workflow work we're doing, and I'll leave it here, is that we're going to have the ability to save these tests. So now I see that there's something wrong. I'm going to go into the workflow. I'm going to change it. And then I got to come back here and fill this out again so that I can run it and see if I fixed it. What we're going to let you do is save these inputs. And you're going to name this as a save test, right? And then when you pull this up, you can either type everything in or you'll have a little drop down and it's like, yeah, run this test. You can then schedule and automate the running of these tests so that you know automatically, maybe you've changed the entity, you've touched something somewhere else in the system, you're going to be able to see, hey, all my workflows still work running regularly. You upgrade the system, you install some third-party stuff. Have I broken anything? You'll be able to exercise all your business logic automated. So that's where we're going with this. And if you guys are interested, I know it was a little bit clunky today. I can kind of polish this up and get it into that position we're talking about. And next week or week after or something, if we want to see this thing again and kind of keep going on this one, if this is an interesting case for everyone, I'm happy to take it forward.
Well, good deal. But you have made the point: reliability and reusability. I think that's. I think there was some cool stuff in there. Bogdan, in honor of time, do you want to close us out?
Yes, personally, I would be very happy to see this workflow, the next level of this system with the workflows, as Reza mentioned. But we'll follow up because with the participants in this webinar, because I think there are also some unanswered questions. So if we can follow up after that, after the webinar, we'll also see what we plan for next week. So again, thanks all of you for being here again in this webinar. And I'm hoping that you learned a lot, and we'll see each other next week. Thank you and have a wonderful day/evening.